We will have time at the end for a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, write them down, or you can write them in the chat and we will answer as many as we can at the end. With that being said, I'm going to pass things over to Denise.
Thanks a lot, Emily, and welcome everybody to today's webinar on engaging ways to teach your students health science education minus those medical mannequins. Now, we're hoping to share some of the content in the curricula that accompanies some of our adult nursing mannequins and geriatric nursing mannequin products. Doesn't matter whether you're a customer or not, you'll get access to all of these lessons. So, you know, we know that we're living in some very different times right now than a few months ago, and a lot of us have been challenged to deliver content online to students. So we hope to just give you a few ideas for taking some of the content and activities that we have and being able to deliver those in an online format. Now, before we begin with that first lesson, I wanted to share these 3 access sites with you. The first one that's listed is our company response to the coronavirus. We have made all of our curricula and product guides available as a resource for every single product that we have. So the screenshot that you see on the right shows you where to access health science resources at that link. You know, you simply scroll down, and when you get to the Manikin curricula link, you can click on health science, and then mannequins will show up, and you can either click on the adult or the geriatric, and that will take you to the lessons. Now, the second and third links that are provided on this slide were given to you if you actually happen to be a customer of ours that have purchased those mannequins. These are just reminders that you can also get to the lessons from those 2 links as well. And at those lessons for each of, at those curricula for each lesson, they include facilitator instructions, slides, handouts, and also some assessment tools. So there's a lot there, and we just hope to highlight some of the things that are available to you and give you ways to think about how you might be able to use that content with your students. So there are multiple lessons available for the geriatric specific nursing mannequin. You can see those 5 lessons listed on the right. So the link that I showed you in the prior slide will take you to those 5 lessons. Now, our adult nursing mannequin has 10 lessons, and these are the 10 that we will actually be going through in the webinar this morning. And again, the links that I shared will take you to each of those specific lessons. Usually we know we use this content many times with the mannequins to provide that hands-on practice in the classroom. But now, because students are working remotely, they're not going to have those mannequins to get their hands on. So we are going to try to share as much of the content, procedures, and background information as we can with students while they're at home, because at some point they do have to have the hands-on. We know that that's never going to be replaced, but we're trying to get things out to them and help them keep learning in the best way that we possibly can here. So when you actually click on the link for the adult mannequin curricula, this is what will come up. It will be each lesson will be listed along with the slide presentation listed right below it. So that is the visual that you'll see when you go to the link for the adult nursing mannequin. Now, there are 3 sections in our lesson template. All of our health science lessons follow pretty much the same template. First, the lesson will start out with what we call a focus activity. And this is usually a short thing to engage students' interest, capture their attention, and get them engaged in the first 5 to 10 minutes of the lesson. Then we move on to the middle section, which we call the learn section. And that's usually where students are learning the primary objectives or a lot of the information in the lesson. And then at the end of these lessons, most of them would be when the students would actually get to do some hands-on practice. And then you would be reviewing those key points, and sometimes there's a quiz, thoughtful reflection question, or something to summarize everything that they have learned in that lesson. So that's the flow of the lessons. Doesn't matter which lesson you go into, that's kind of how it will be laid out for you. So the first lesson we're going to take a look at this morning is going to be one on pressure injuries. And there are 3 sections to our pressure injury lesson. The focus section kicks it off where there's a scenario, and students read through it. It's regarding a scenario with a patient with a pressure injury, and there are some reflection questions. And this is what we call an empathy activity, where you're walking in the shoes of the patient with a pressure injury. And in this one, there's also another intro activity. It's an anatomy identification activity. Then in the learn section, that's where you'd be actually lecturing or sharing the information as you present the slides. And then at the end, there's a brief multiple choice wrap up for this lesson. So we're gonna try to give you some information on how you can give students access to most or all of this information that we have here. Now, just a note here, I'm gonna spend a little bit more time on this first lesson sharing how I would do it more in a Google Classroom because all the other 9 lessons are pretty much structured the same way. You can see how you could take and apply some of these ideas throughout the 10 lessons. Now, just a note, I know many of you are using Google Classroom. Some of you might have other LMS systems like Blackboard or Moodle, but a majority of classrooms, a higher percentage use the Google Classroom. And I don't use Google Classroom, but I thought it would be a very good exercise to try to go in and see how I could take some of our content and quickly move it to a Google platform with really no experience. So what I did was I went and I watched a 15-minute tutorial just to kind of get the lay of the land. And then I opened up my own free Google Classroom account just to get some practice. So keep in mind the tips and tricks that I'm giving you for today come from a novice who wanted to show that you could do these things and share the content in a relatively painless manner. But if you are fluent in Google Classroom and Google Docs and things, you're gonna be able to do this much quicker, much more easily. You're gonna know shortcuts, but at least be aware that I, who had never used it before, was able to fairly quickly get the content out to a Google Classroom site that I'd created. And I was able to do it. So it's if you're not that familiar, you can still figure it out. I figure if I can, most of you guys can too. A lot of the curriculum assets we are sharing are PDFs. So those can always be downloaded and as a file and shared and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started with our pressure injuries. So our kickoff is that to that lesson is where students will read through and answer questions, again, regarding a scenario that's meant to teach empathy and focus on patient-centered care. So in a classroom, you'd think, pair, share with your students. However, online, you could use this, you could post this as a reading assignment and have students answer those reflection questions as a written exercise. Now, in the lower left part of the screenshot, I've actually created an assignment in Google Docs by posting both of the pre-lesson activities. One is that scenario that you see above, and the other, and I created a Q&A assignment from that. And then the other one is that anatomy activity, which I'm going to show you now. And I also posted this as a Google assignment as well. Now, on this particular one, students are to match the location via a number on the body with the accurate body part on the list. And I saved this as an image, but you could also save the whole thing as a PDF if you want. Then I created an assignment and I posted it. You saw that on the previous slide, but then I also created a quiz in about 2 minutes. I typed the name of the body part and in an open text answer, so students could just enter the number into the field and submit it. Again, I'm sure there's more streamlined ways to do this, but by using things like a snipping tool or PDFs and things like that, I was able to give students access to this activity fairly quickly. So in the next part of the lesson, which is usually the slide presentation, that's where instructors would use the notes from the curriculum to share a lot of the background information needed. Well, in this case, when we open the file, it gives us access to the PowerPoint and the lesson plan. So we could copy the PowerPoint to our desktop and then import it into our LMS system, or even import it into Google Docs and post it as material students need to review. But we also want your students to have access to the information that accompanies each slide. So the quickest way I found to do that was to do like a screenshot or use, again, my snipping tool to create a document that I posted. And I have that in the material section to be read along with looking at the slides. So above on the left is a copy of that Google Doc I created with the instructions to read the content as they access the slide. And then on the right is the material I created with a header of pressure injury slide presentation information. So I imported, both the content document created from the curriculum info, and I also posted that slide presentation. So now students will have all of the information that they need to read and follow along in that section of the lesson. Now, the last part of the lesson is a pressure injury assessment and documentation activity. So if you were in a regular classroom, of course, you could use the Manikin with those pressure injuries on it for students to do skin assessments and documentation. But because that's not the case, one way I thought that we could have students do this without those resources is the following. I would save that assessment worksheet as a PDF or as an image. Then I would create a Google Doc that would include an image of the patient. So find an image of a patient. Do a close-up of several images of different types of pressure injuries that they, quote, find on their patient. Then, of course, have them access the assessment handout, and then add an area to document their findings in writing. And these are some of the images that I used as I created mine quickly in Google Classroom. I started the document with a photo, and I named my patient Jim Jenkins. Then you can see 3 pressure injuries that I said were present during the assessment. Then the third part is where instructors would walk students through the assessment as if they were in the room with the patient following the procedures. And then at the bottom is an area where they can document their findings. So it's just one way you could try to adapt that type of activity or lesson onto an online format. And this again is that short quiz at the end that accompanies the lesson. You could save the whole thing as a PDF and they could submit their answers. Or you could retype the quiz into a quiz creator like in Google or your own LMS system. And it literally, with only 5 questions, took me less than 5 minutes to do that. So it's not a hard thing, but if you want to use that content, that is there as well. So now let's look at another lesson that accompanies our mannequins, and that is intradermal injections. And here are the 3 sections to that lesson. The introductory activity, there's 2 of them. There's an empathy activity, and the scenario focuses on the right of administration prior to medication administration. And of course, it has those reflection questions again. And then there's an anatomy activity where you have to identify the layers of the skin. Then in the Learn section, students get a thorough introduction to intradermal injections, proper procedure, and the documentation surrounding it. They get that through the slide presentation and again, those lecture notes, which you can post as material for your students to access. And then this lesson, the summarize section, is where students would usually practice those intradermal injections, of course, in a classroom if you had that, the materials, and if possible. And then, of course, you've got the review quiz at the end. So to kick it off, you could post those handouts for the empathy activity. And the reflection questions could be, of course, a writing assignment. And then the anatomy one, which is identifying the layers of the skin activity, you could also post that as an assignment to complete. These are both in PDFs, so they're with a little bit of trouble, you could convert them over to an editable one. I don't know how to do that because I'm not that tech savvy with converting the PDFs, but with snipping tools and screenshots, you can quickly put those out there for students to access. Now, another thing we know that students love video. So there are dozens and dozens of short video clips that could be used to show the layers of the skin and present the same content in a different manner. So on the screen is just one short video clip link that I found. It's 1:05, and it identifies the layers of the skin. And it gives really concise information on the role of the skin. So you could have them do that in lieu of the written activity in the curriculum, or to augment it if you wanted to. But that's just one link. There are many, many more out there if you do some searching on YouTube. Now, an important part of the lesson, of course, is that middle Learn section, which is the slide presentation and lecture info. So once again, you could post those to your LMS system so students could read this or access it. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could even email the content if you don't have an LMS system. Now, if your students are using a textbook and they might even have some of their own content, perhaps you want to just pick and choose from the various activities to supplement what you already have. Now, there's also a part of information in the slide content where instructors actually do a demo in the classroom of an intradermal injection. For showing that, I'd suggest using, again, a good short link to a video embedded that students can view. Now, here are just a few examples, but there are many, many more that I found out there. Now, You know, they're not going to have the manikin or practice pad to do these on probably, but this may be the best that we can do right now. If you're fortunate enough to have an injection pad for student use at home, that would be great, but at least they can see it in action and they can understand the steps that they need to go through. Now, another idea would be perhaps to have students purchase their own practice pads for use at home. There's many on Amazon. We even have some on our own website if students wanted to do that. The difficulty would be that they would have to be provided with the right kind of needles to practice those types of injections, so that might not work. But just a few things out there. The one that we have is a 3-layered injection pad. So you could do intradermal, intramuscular, and subcutaneous on it for that independent practice. Again, this lesson will wrap up with a short quiz that can be shared and completed in your LMS system as well. Our third lesson we're going to look at now is intramuscular injections. And this one is laid out very similar to the intradermal one, where students you know, have their intro activities. They are given all the background information and shown how to do it. They practice it, and then they're tested on it at the end. So prior to students practicing, one thing you could consider is maybe creating your own video showing you doing an intramuscular injection if you have access to your medical mannequins or your practice pads. Maybe you like to have the control of that. But again, you could also share a good YouTube video of intramuscular injections, and there are a lot of them. Now, this is a tip you might not think is a viable idea. I am not weighing in whether it is good or bad, but I just saw it out there. And that was where nursing students were practicing injections on fruit, such as oranges or peaches. Again, I'm not advocating to do it or not. It's just an option I saw, and I thought I would throw it out there for your consideration. But again, there's really only so much you can do with students as they're away from the classroom and skills lab. But we can at least help them become familiar with the procedures and get that part out of the way in the event you can get back to the classroom. More time can hopefully then be spent with that hands-on practice. Now we're going to take a look at our catheterization lesson. The empathy activity here is a scenario surrounding a scenario with catheterization and seeing it from a patient's perspective with reflection questions. Here the anatomy activity is identifying the anatomical landmarks of genitalia, both male and female. The Learn section does a thorough introduction of insertion of straight and indwelling catheters on both male and female. The information is presented in a slide presentation and lecture notes, which again can be posted for student access. And then the summarized section in a classroom would have students actually practicing the insertion of straight and indwelling catheters on the manikin. But in this case, they may just need to take that review quiz at the end. So here's a few ideas for activities for a catheterization lesson here. The empathy scenario is a really good one to share with students because this is really a sensitive area. So instead of just sending this to students to read and submitting answers, maybe you'd like to turn this one into a group discussion. Now if you have access on an LMS where you can post things for students to access and share comments, maybe post the scenario and then invite students to answer the questions, having them chime in and then build off of each other's answers. So this again, if you could do that in a discussion forum, or if you're fortunate enough to be in a situation where you can be doing a synchronous class on Zoom or video, this could be a very rich discussion area to kick off a catheterization lesson. Now for procedures, we have, of course, a slide presentation and content with the facilitator guide notes that could be prepared and shared with students for that independent reading. That's probably the most efficient way for them to get access to the content. However, there is a part of the class in the lesson, if you were in person, where the instructor demonstrates the procedure. Again, the best you might be able to do here is get those good videos that are showing the procedure, or create your own video using your mannequins and task trainers. Now on YouTube, when I search, there are actually specific videos for both male and female cath insertion. So you want to make sure you review the content though before you have students show it, because you want it to cover the procedure and content that you desire and the breadth. So just some ideas there. One activity that you do have available in our lesson materials is the procedure sheet. And this is really in the lesson where they usually use it to practice the procedure. And this is true of all 10 lessons I'm talking about today. You can take these, and if you wanted to, you could type them into a Word doc and you could scramble the order and then challenge your students to put them in the correct order. Now in Google Docs, you could even set this up so that each step has a correct number associated with it, and it could actually be auto-graded. We know hands-on practice really needs to be done in a skills lab for catheterization. But again, we're just trying to get those students all that information they need to be ready as possible so it can save time when you're back in person. Our next lesson we're going to take a look at is phlebotomy. Now, the three parts of the lesson here, the empathy activity here is focusing on the scenario of giving injections and how to make it less upsetting for patients. The anatomy empathy, or the anatomy kickoff activity is locating the veins used in phlebotomy. Then it moves on to the learn section where students learn about blood specimen collection through phlebotomy with a slide presentation and those lecture notes. And then the summarize or review section here would be where students receive the procedures for doing phlebotomy. In a classroom they would practice, and then you could follow up with that review quiz. So here's some content areas that we wanted to share. That could supplement a lesson provided either in our curriculum or some of the content that you already have. First of all, use those good videos for phlebotomy procedures. There are many, many out there that do a great job. Another thing that we found, and the link is provided for you on the screen, are animated anatomical tutorials of the vein and artery systems. And this is just one that I came across, but the content was very, very good and very professional, and I thought did a really good job of explaining all of that kind of thing. Another thing that's out there that you might not even be aware of are free phlebotomy apps. There's one called Phlebotomy Technician, and students could download that and they could get access to all sorts of information and things available to phlebotomy technicians. It might help them learn a few things. A few other content ideas. I was looking up simulation providers, and there's one called SimTix. Now, I'm not advocating the quality or anything like that. I'm just sharing things that I found. And they actually provide a free 1-week trial. So what your students could do if they wanted is go on there and they could try the phlebotomy module. Now, if they wanted to even subscribe to it, it's $9.50 a month, not each module. So for $9.50, they get access each month to tons of different simulations and lessons and things like that. And I thought the price of that really didn't seem too bad, but there were specific lessons surrounding phlebotomy. So I thought that might be a really helpful source if they're looking for just some independent practice resources. Again, we have many content pages in the specific lessons that have student checkoffs on procedures. So make sure and use those. Again, you could put some into a flashcard format, scramble the order. Students maybe print and physically cut them out and put them in order. So there's some hands-on things you could do there. Again, use free apps. There's another one that's called the Mega Blood Draw Simulator. Again, I can't speak to the effectiveness of all of these things, but it might be worth checking out. You might find some things on there that could be helpful for your students. Next, we're going to take a look at our Introduction to IV Insertion lesson. And it starts with an empathy activity where it focuses the scenario on IV insertion and how to understand what it is like from that patient perspective. The anatomy lesson is identifying parts of the venous anatomy for this one as well. In the middle part of the lection, students will learn all about insertion of IV catheters. Again, they've got an extensive slide presentation and lecture notes. And then the summaries part of this lesson is where they would usually, they receive all of the procedures step-by-step for doing IV insertions. Of course, in the classroom, you'd allow for that hands-on practice. And then they do have a review quiz at the end of this lesson. So once again, there are a plethora of those videos available to show the procedure online. And there's some very, very good ones where the students could watch more than one to get more than one's perspective, but very well done. Now, here's another one that I don't know what you're going to think of, but I ran across it. I thought, could you prepare at-home practice lab kits for students to do these kind of things like IV insertions onto the one I found was on a banana or other fruit, or like we said before, the intramuscular, intradermal, some of those injections. Could you put together some kind of a lab kit that would have a practice pad, or, you know, students provide the fruit, maybe with the right materials. You know, you've got the gloves, you might have the alcohol pad, and then the right, you know, syringe or needle. Put them all in, and maybe even if you have a class pack of practice pads, put that up in a nice bag, you know, sanitize it, and make it available to your students to be able to check out. Now, I don't know if that's realistic or not, given you know, the situation you're in with your schooling right now, but I thought, well, it might be worth considering. And there was actually, this is a video, or a link that I found on YouTube, where the student was actually going to practice using a banana. So it made me think, maybe in some cases we might be able to provide some of that kind of thing for students to do practice at home on their own. And I'm thinking more like post-secondary. I know injections and things like that usually aren't done as much at the high school level. Our next module is Introduction to Patient Care, and this lesson is specific to bathing patients. So it starts out with an empathy activity focusing on bathing the patient and how to understand what that is like from a patient's perspective. That's very personal and a sensitive area. Next, in the Learn section, students will learn about how to do complete and partial bathing procedures in bed for patients. There's slides to follow along with lecture notes, but then usually instructors perform one of these on a mannequin. Now, in this case, again, if you as the instructor still can access mannequins, maybe you would prepare your own demonstration one using a mannequin. And then students usually would get the procedures for doing the patient bathing practice, and then they follow up with that review quiz. Now, here's some ideas from resources on teaching patient bed bathing. The video that I'm sharing on the top, this actually is one where it's showing an instructor bathing a mannequin. And again, you could create your own, but if you don't want to do that, there are some out there that other instructors have already done for you that might assist you with that. I also found one on assisting with a shower as well that might be helpful for students to take a look at. But this is a skill where actually students could practice on siblings, parents or guardians, or even friends that they have access to in their home setting. Now, you know, we have them, of course, skip some of those more sensitive areas if they did this at home, but they certainly could do some hands-on practice of partial bed bathing and things like that, that they could access comfortably on the people that they have around them. You know, maybe the family members or friends would want to wear, you know, swimwear to feel more comfortable, but the thing is, they actually probably have access to people that they could practice some of this on. So this might be a great one for you to be able to assign some homework to students to actually do hands-on. The next one we're going to look at is our range of motion lesson. And this one starts out with an empathy activity where it focuses on what it is like to be exercised from the patient perspective. Then in the middle section, it talks about considerations during range of motion exercises and proper procedures surrounding it. Then at the end of the lesson, students will receive the procedures for doing several different range of motion exercises. Typically they'd practice that and you'd follow it up with that brief quiz. Here's some ideas. So this specific lesson has a lot of information in the PowerPoint presentation and facilitator instructions. Because it's such a meaty module, this is one we really recommend that you send out for students to review prior to attempting hands-on practice with a person. Again, you could use those family members or friends that you have available to you to do a great at-home practice opportunity. So we've got a couple of skills here that really could be done at home. Again, you could use those informative videos that show good range of motion exercises to supplement the content that you already have. And the one that I've got on the screen there in the link, that was about 11 minutes long. It was for a CNA class. So if that's the type of course that you're doing, you might want to take a look at that one and see if that's one that you would want to share with your students. The ninth lesson we're going to look at today is our Ostomy Care lesson. And this one starts out with an empathy activity where they're going to focus that scenario on what it would be like to have an ostomy for the rest of your life. And most of us have not had to go through that, but if you really think about that, that could be really difficult in many areas of life. How do you manage that? The middle part of this, the learn section, has students learn about the purpose behind and the indications for an ostomy, as well as the supplies and the proper procedure surrounding ostomy care. Typically, an instructor would do a demo, and then students after that would go into receiving the procedures for ostomy care. Usually they would practice and then follow up with a review quiz in this lesson. Here's an ostomy care video that shows an instructor talking through a skills lab demo. I thought it was quite good. Again, you could create your own ostomy care demo using your own manikin in a similar fashion if you have one available and like to do that. Then of course you'd embed that lesson and share it with the students in your learning environment that you have. Now, if you like to search for free apps on app stores, there are several ostomy care apps available students could download, and they can watch those procedures. So have them use those cell phones that they all love so dearly. Another place where you could tap into resources that could be found online are from, in this particular one, the United Ostomy Association of America. Ostomy organizations and association sites have a lot of educational material available to the general public. So you might find some good handouts, some videos, some fact sheets, but this could be said of most of the other topics we've talked about. There are probably associations for pressure injuries, for range of motion, for injections, for nursing in general. So use associations and educational organizations that exist. Go on websites and see what they have available that students could tap into. And our 10th lesson that we wanted to review for you today is all about introduction to IV bolus medication administration. Now this lesson kicks off with an empathy scenario where it includes IV medication administration in that scenario. This one also includes a safety lesson, and this is to help students learn to identify safety concerns related to IV bolus medications. Then it will move on to the middle section of the lesson where students learn all about background information for IV bolus medication administration and the proper procedure and documentation surrounding it. And then at the end, they'll receive all of the procedures for IV bolus medication administration. Usually they would practice and then it would follow up with a review quiz. So this is the safety activity that I was referring to in the prior slide. You could use, it's where they use their knowledge of basic IVs to try to match the word to the correct description of the safety concern. So this is available. You could post it for students as a PDF. You could do a screenshot and create some way of doing a quiz of your own, but that's in there and it's quite good. So I wanted to make sure that I called that out so you knew it was in that lesson. Now every lesson we're trying to share all of the available content so that students can learn the background and procedural steps and be ready for the hands-on whenever possible. So again, find that good demonstration video that shows IV bolus medication administration. Or if you're creative, you could create your own short demo video and post it to your students. Now there are resources out there also called Quizlet that have ready to use quizzes and activities on a wide variety of topics. And when I did some searching on IV bolus medication administration, there was actually a Quizlet one that exists that students can take. And then there's an answer key that they can learn from at the end. And I've provided that link for you on the screen there. Now there's another thing that I came across just this week on another webinar for health science, and it's called edpuzzle.com. I went out to the site. I haven't created anything, but I wanted to point this out because a lot of health science educators on another website were just raving about it. And it's a site where you can create your own videos and post them. There are other videos available there that you can use, or you can import videos from things like YouTube on a given subject, say it's injections or whatever. And then it has the ability to also, you can add questions to the videos and create assignments and things. And then this is supposed to be content that's easily moved into Google Classroom and other LMS systems. So I don't know anything more about it than that, but it was one resource that I saw many health science educators raving about, and I thought, well, it was worth a mention, and if you haven't checked it out, you might want to do it. So it's edpuzzle.com. So those are the 10 lessons that we have content available for you, along with our different mannequins. So I wanted to highlight just a couple other sources you might want to consider. The National Consortium for Health Science Education has a teacher educator association all of themselves called the HSEA, Health Science Education Association. And they have one of the most active web pages I have ever seen for lessons and posting things. You can become a member also, and when you do, you get access to a whole library of lessons and assets and things like that. So if you haven't heard about the National Consortium and specifically the Health Science Educator Association, you might want to check that out because their website's just been fantastic. I've seen so much in the past month where they're sharing lessons and free resources and webinars and videos and ideas all across to both secondary and post-secondary. So great source out there. I just wanted to point it out to everybody. So now what? We have given you lots of information. If you want to see more of our classroom resources, you can certainly go out to realityworks.com. We also do have some free lessons on health science career exploration that are there. We also have some geriatric lessons. In fact, at the original link I gave you, you have access to lessons on much more health science content than just the 10 that I shared with you. These were specific to our mannequins, but you can certainly go and check out dozens and dozens of other lessons that exist in our lesson portfolio. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Emily, and I'm going to have her share some of the questions if there have been any that have been asked as we've been going along.
Yeah, Denise, one of the big questions was, could you go back to the slide with the link for our online resources?
Yes, I will. Yes, I will do that. Here we go. So again, the first link on the top there, the access your guides and curriculum /, that's where it will show you everything Realityworks has. So in addition to health science, we have family and consumer science, we have ag, welding, lots and lots of things. Family consumer sciences. So to get down to the health science, you can see on the screen there, you scroll down, and then within health science, there's different categories. There's skills training, there's moulage training. I highlighted the mannequin assets today, but there's also geriatric care. We also have anatomical models. And if you go into the guides for those, it gives you information on parts identification if you're doing anat and phys lessons. So there's a lot of things in there that we have for you that you have access to.
And then Denise, do you want to go over what they'll be getting after this presentation?
Yeah, great question. After today's webinar, you will be receiving a link that is a recording of today's presentation. You will be getting a certificate of attendance for your participation that some instructors want to use that for professional development hours that they can submit. You will also be getting links to all of the specific PDFs and websites and things like that that I've referred to in all of the lessons. And then we're also going to ask you, if you would, to complete a short evaluation via a link. It's a survey that asks for what other topics would you like to see webinars on. We are very interested in that. So that's all coming after today's webinar to you in an email.
Perfect. And then I guess we do have a question on if there's anything for a CNA or nursing assistant virtual webinar that we'll be hosting.
Not specific to CNA. This was probably the one that's closest to that. We did have a geriatric simulation webinar that's archived that we did last week that you might find a lot of that content very pertinent to CNAs. But we have a lot of lessons on our website at the link that I shared on the screen that are perfect for CNA types of procedures. You might want to go to our geriatric mannequin and some of our geriatric trainers, and that might be the most appropriate that we have.
Perfect. It looks like that answers all of our questions today.
Fantastic. Well, we'd like to thank you for participating in today's webinar. We hope that you will find some of the information, the videos, and just some of the ideas worthy of trying in the situation where you find yourself as a remote instructor now, where students are having to learn things at home. None of this, of course, will ever replace the the in-person, where you have to have the hands-on. CTE is all about that hands-on learning, and that will have to happen at some point. But for right now, we're just going to try to give all of our students as many good resources and chances to learn content and things that we can. So we're going to just keep throwing ideas out there and hoping that some of them will really resonate with those students of ours.
Yep, and then we did have one last question, Denise.
Okay.
It was regarding the geriatric webinar. Do they have to register for that?
No, that was last week, and all they have to do is I believe the link is on our website under webinars, under archived webinars, and it's an on-demand where you can just click on it and watch it, and it runs about 40 minutes.
Perfect. And then on slide 47, you went over healthscience.org. Do you want to go back to that one? We have a couple questions on it.
Oh, no, we need to go further here. Sorry. It's not letting me spell it. Here we go. Slide 47.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, the link that I had here was to that Quizlet. And if you just, in Google, just type Quizlet intravenous medication, it'll come up. And then edpuzzle.com was the other website where I thought you might want to try that one out. A lot of teachers were enjoying that one this week.
Perfect. And then also just they want to go over the NC HSE again.
Oh yeah, let me go to that slide. Here we go. So the National Consortium for Health Science Education, the acronym is NCHSE. If you put that in and just do a quick keyword search, it'll take you to their website. But then on Facebook, HSEA, the Health Science Educator Association, that is like I said, the most active website I have seen during the coronavirus last month, where health science educators, both post-secondary and high school, are just on it, sharing tons of stuff. And if you haven't had a chance, go out to Facebook and check them out. Just a terrific resource.
Perfect. And then this is our last one. Will the PowerPoint be available for them?
I guess if somebody wants the PowerPoint specifically, why don't you go ahead and email us at Realityworks. You can see all the slides in the video, but if you really want that PowerPoint, we'll send that out individually on an as requested basis.
Oh, and then one last question regarding the recorded webinar. Are they allowed to share this with their colleagues?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And all of the links and all the attachments, everything. Please do share.
Perfect. It looks like that answers all of our questions today, Denise.
All right, good. Thanks again for participating, and we really hope that you find some of this useful, and best wishes for a very productive rest of your school year. Thank you.